Amelia Luna is a professional engineer, an Envision sustainability professional, which is an interesting designation, as well as a lead AP. She has 15 years of civil and environmental engineering experience and leads the water and wastewater team for Sherwood Design Engineers. As a principal engineer, she spearheads Sherwood's water reuse projects, including wastewater treatment, net zero, net positive water systems, as well as water quality improvements in parks and open spaces, urban developments, and campuses. Amelia also has key expertise in the process engineering, detailed design, and permitting of on-site non-potable water systems. And Taylor Nokhoudian is a water resources program manager at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, or SF Water Power Sewer. She manages the on-site water reuse program, allowing buildings in San Francisco to treat and reuse water on-site for non-potable applications. So I will get out of the way and let you two talk about getting reuse projects done. So I'm stopping the share and tiptoeing away.
Off stage. Thanks, Dennis. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thanks. So yes, this is a conversation sort of in Commonwealth Club style. Amelia in conversation with Taylor to work through some sort of current topics on on-site non-potable water systems. So I hope you all enjoy it, and we'll try to leave some room for questions at the end. We also, because we don't have slides, did want to leave some resources behind. So before our presentation, our discussion is through, we will leave a few links in the chat for you to reference after the conversation. So to open up the conversation, Taylor, you're involved in, very deeply involved in San Francisco PUC's program in on-site non-potable water systems, and you've had a chance to see a lot of projects through, very early stages through to completion. You've also had a chance to see some projects, not be completed for various reasons. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you was with regard to district scale on-site non-potable water systems, which can be complex to implement because that involves on-site non-potable water between multiple parcels. So a district scale, not to be confused with a, say, public water district or wastewater district, really implies, that water and wastewater is transferring between parcels, to define that for the group. So we wanted to get into some of the advantages why one might do that, some of the challenges, which I inferred earlier, there have been some challenges to implementing these projects, and what some of the mitigations or solutions might be for those. So Taylor, maybe you can speak to what are some of those advantages of doing district scale. If it does have some additional challenges, why might one take it on?
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to say thank you to Dennis and Sustainable Silicon Valley for hosting us today, and Amelia for collaborating with me on this webinar today, or conversation. So yeah, as Amelia had pointed out, district scale systems are water reuse systems that are sharing water across 2 or more buildings. And when we're thinking about district scale or neighborhood scale type projects, we see that there's advantages on the economics in terms of overall lower initial capital cost. So the alternative to a district scale system is a building by building approach. So like a redevelopment project could have like 4 buildings, could have 11 buildings. And when you're talking at that scale, building by building gray water systems or even wastewater systems could add up in terms of each individual building having their own on-site water treatment system. So when you go with a district approach, that really means one system serving all 4 buildings or all 11 buildings within your redevelopment project. So, you know, looking at the capital cost there compared to a building by building can definitely be cheaper and more financially beneficial. There's also the long-term operation and maintenance costs that can be improved with a district scale system. When you have building by building systems, you'll have to have an operator operating each individual treatment system. So it could be more beneficial from a labor perspective and an operations perspective to have one system that an operator is responsible for, rather than 10 or 11 systems that single operator is responsible for. So, you know, economies of scale, there's definitely benefits there in terms of operations and the financial aspect. And then also just in general, physical building space is a huge deal, especially in San Francisco and in these growing urban environments. It takes space to install an on-site water reuse system. And so when you're thinking about, you know, whether you want to do a district scale system or put it in each individual building, if you're putting it in each individual building, that means taking up additional building space within each of those buildings that could otherwise be used for rentable or leasable space or for other types of space uses. So just things to think about in terms of the advantages there of district scale systems. You know, as you did mention, there are definitely challenges associated with going district. There's public-private ownership issues related to you know, potential multiple owners that are involved with one redevelopment project. How do you address the administrative responsibilities, the operational issues, any, you know, liability challenges there associated with the public-private interface, and also potential multiple owners being involved, or developers being involved in one single project. And, you know, the thing that I would say about that is really take lessons learned from other district scale reuse projects that have happened. Mission Rock redevelopment project is one example that's currently under construction in San Francisco. They have decided to form a nonprofit utility that's going to be responsible for operating and managing their district scale blackwater treatment system. So that's a redevelopment project that's happening on the eastern side of San Francisco. It's a multi-building project, and they decided to go district scale, and their nonprofit utility will be called Mission Rock Utilities. And again, they're partnering with a operator to basically form this nonprofit utility that will be ultimately the responsible management entity, or the responsible party that's on the hook for compliance with water quality standards and the ongoing operations of the system. That's not the only approach, yeah, that's out there. I think there's definitely flexibility there. But yeah, feel free to jump in.
Great. Well, I just wanted to give you a chance to take a breath, but that's exactly right. So this concept, I just wanted to reinforce, of responsible management entity, and you'll see that through the literature for these on-site non-potable water systems, which is not new. It is a concept that's built into ensuring that water and wastewater systems and water reuse systems throughout the country can be maintained over time. So it is a very important concept, but I appreciate the complexity, you know, that owners face when dealing with district scale systems. I've seen some of those challenges myself, and so some of the mitigations to that what I'm hearing can be through sort of learning from some of these projects on the ground, whether that's forming a nonprofit utility or managing that through a sort of commercial version of a homeowners association or HOA. It sounds like there are a lot of tools in the toolbox that can be sort of lifted from other types of development and utilized here in the case of district scale water reuse.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I did want to also talk about some of the other items that come up around district scale and sort of key mitigation for that, and then maybe we can move on to our next topic. which is phasing. And so often these district scale developments have buildings that might not be constructed and occupied along the same timeline. And so as we look at these projects, the best thing that we can recommend that folks look at is early planning and ensuring that there's some key understanding of when critical infrastructure will come online with that phasing. So early planning is always a key element with any infrastructure, and water and on-site water reuse is no exception. So.
Totally agree. I think also I'll just add that, you know, while phasing can be challenging, the way that on-site water treatment systems are being designed and implemented is increasingly modular and scalable. So that can help with phasing approaches, and different times when different buildings are getting occupied and coming online and being constructed, is being able to like modularly scale up your treatment technologies to account for increased flow, increased occupancy. So that's another solution to be able to deal with phasing challenges.
Perfect. I can appreciate that from the design perspective, right? We can do things from the design side to make sure there's flexibility. So thanks for that, Taylor. So the next set of questions, series of questions, is around, you know, this topic is about how to get these systems built, right? And we've both dealt with that a lot over the years. And Taylor, I know you specifically are deeply embedded in your work on codes and standards. So when we talk about implementation, there's also complexity around permitting and what standard am I really supposed to meet here, and is it changing? And so it'd be great to get sort of your perspective on that and some of the current efforts that you're involved with to help simplify the implementation from a permitting standpoint.
Yeah, we've been involved in various efforts over the years to seek alignment with the latest public health guidance and the plumbing codes and standards that govern the installation of these on-site water treatment systems in California. I think many of you may know that my boss, Paula Kehoe, chairs the National Blue Ribbon Commission for On-Site Non-Potable Water Systems. That's a national group of water and wastewater utilities and public health regulators from across the country, really geared towards advancing science and peer-to-peer learning around on-site water reuse systems and permitting and managing those systems in their communities. And the Blue Ribbon Commission has really been promoting a risk-based water quality standard approach. That's something that we can link to more resources in the chat for you all if you are not familiar with that approach. But you know, when it comes down to implementation, it really comes down to public health departments, environmental health departments, and building departments looking to the plumbing codes and what the plumbing codes are saying about what's required to install these types of systems. Many of you might be familiar with NSF 350. That's a standard that's been out there for a long time and is referenced in the California Plumbing Code as a design and performance standard for gray water systems. But it's not the most protective of public health, and it's not a risk-based water quality standard. And through the work that the Blue Ribbon Commission has done to advance the appropriate water quality standards, we're really trying to align all of these codes and standards with this risk-based approach. And definitely there's momentum on like the water quality side with the State Water Resources Control Board mandated through SB 966 to develop risk-based water quality standards. We're seeing Washington State pass a House bill that's directing the state at their level to develop risk-based water quality standards. Austin Water, Hawaii, New York City, these are all communities out there that are all moving towards this approach. And consistency, I think, will help in terms of easing the marketplace for technology vendors that are designing these systems and engineers that are working on these systems when there's consistency in what the appropriate water quality standards are and how those are referenced in plumbing codes and standards. So through the National Blue Ribbon Commission, we've been working closely with the codes organizations, IAPMO and ICC. Those are the two plumbing code organizations that put out the model plumbing codes that states adopt and then local jurisdictions can adopt from there, to again, look at how we can create alignment across all of these codes that will ultimately, hopefully, ease implementation down the road.
So what I hear, Taylor, is that San Francisco is leading the nation in getting everybody to march in line and think about permitting these systems in a way that is protective of public health and streamlined. So thanks for that. And as a practitioner, I know that's very useful. And for those practicing in California, you may be familiar with Senate Bill 966, which was a statute that was passed a few years ago. And that has set into place the adoption of these risk-based standards for California. So basically taking the hard work that was done with the National Blue Ribbon Commission and Sfpuc and promulgating that standard as a statewide standard. So as the next topic, we want to sort of talk about the next phase of that. We expect the State Water Board to issue those standards as far as treatment goes later this year. And the following year is the time frame for local cities, counties to implement what are called local programs. And so we wanted to hear from you, Taylor, on why they are important to maybe help those folks at the local level understand what it means to create a local program, seeing as Sfpuc created your own. And I believe you have some resources on that. So I've linked in the chat, although I don't think I can chat to everyone, Sfpuc's website for on-site water reuse. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that website, you'll see a lot of resources there. And I'll get a couple more links as we go through this. So as my first question, you know, the state has sort of stated that they you know, don't have the capacity to really step into all of these local jurisdictions to permit these on-site systems. And so one of the intents, in addition to creating a uniform health code framework for on-site reuse, this risk-based standard focused on removing pathogens to a level that's appropriate given the use of the water as non-potable. That will be sort of behind us come the end of the year, right? And clearly there will be some ongoing work on that framework, as there has been with Title 22 over the years. But you know, the real question is, who issues the permit, right? Who administers the program? And the idea is that local entities will. So with that in mind, we are aware that those local entities, you know, even given some of these technical resources and direction coming from the State Water Board, may feel that they don't have the staff or don't have the resources, or there's really not the expertise at the local level to implement these programs. And so, you know, I hear these concerns, and I want to acknowledge that, you know, these are real issues we need to sort of work through over this next period of time while we look at transitioning to some of these programs. But I wanted to highlight that there are a lot of available resources, and maybe Taylor, you could sort of speak to the work you've done in forming the program in San Francisco, and what resources do you think are out there for some of the cities and counties who might feel like they don't have nowhere to start?
Great question. I think we can learn a lot from the trials and tribulations that we went through in establishing our program back in 2012. Where we started in 2012 is not where we are today, but it's taken a long time to come to our mandatory requirement now that we have in the city that requires new construction projects to install on-site water reuse systems. But back in 2012, it really started with bringing together the stakeholders that are relevant to forming a permitting program. So we spend a lot of time talking to our wastewater colleagues, building inspection department, environmental health department, and our public works department, and really sat down and identified what the roles and authorities were for each department, so we could hammer out really who needs to be involved and how we need to be involved. So that was the first step, was kind of convening this working group and identifying the key stakeholders that have some role to play in the permitting process. The next step was really identifying what types of alternate water sources and what non-potable end uses we wanted to permit in our program. So our program covers the gamut. It covers the reuse on site of gray water, black water, condensate, stormwater, rainwater, and foundation drainage for non-potable end uses such as toilet and urinal flushing, irrigation, clothes washing, cooling tower makeup, and drain trap priming and other uses. But that's not to say that every program has to start there. So it's really identifying what types of alternate water sources and non-potable end uses make sense to be captured on site in your community. And then establishing your program rules and regs by looking to the state in terms of establishing those water quality standards that are based on the risk-based framework, establishing monitoring and reporting requirements, and understanding how your program fits into your local construction and building permit processes. And then from there, it's implementing your program, learning along the way, and growing from a potential voluntary requirement to a mandatory requirement, if that makes sense for your community. I recognize that one size does not fit all, and what may work for San Francisco may not work for other communities, but we have resources available for communities that are interested in establishing programs. The blueprint, which is, I think we'll link to it in the chat, but that's a fantastic resource that was developed a few years ago that really talks about this 10-step process to developing a local program, kind of goes through the steps that I just talked about in much more detail. And then there's also the National Blue Ribbon Commission's guidebook for developing and implementing regulations for implementing an on-site non-potable water system. And that guidebook has templates in it. I would say that's the most helpful part of that guidebook, is templates for establishing local ordinances and for establishing rules and regulations. So it gives you a starting point to work with in terms of how you would go about forming these documents and putting the regulatory structure in place in your community.
Perfect. Thanks, Taylor. And that your website at SFPUC's Onsite Water Reuse website, which I did link, and hopefully Dennis can share out, is sort of a one-stop shop for a lot of these documents. So the National Blue Ribbon Commission website is linked there. Another great resource and organization that has been providing some publications in this space is the U.S. Water Alliance. So I'll also provide their link there. A lot of great, really digestible and short documents available for you. So for our last topic, we wanted to really dive into our on-site non-potable water reuse systems available to all developers, and thinking about affordable housing and other potential users that may feel that this is a additional expense versus something that's available to everyone. So Taylor, I wanted to ask you about, I know you have a incentive program at SFPUC, and if you could maybe speak to some of the ways in which SFPUC is working to make these systems accessible, and why those incentives are a good idea from a utility perspective. I'll make one technical note, which is that one of the great benefits of moving to this risk-based framework is the moving away from all of the lab analysis and sampling. And in the work I do, what we notice is that when we're looking at operational costs, which do play a big role here in terms of the burden on the users long term, a huge portion of that is for lab analysis, and that's because of the current regulatory requirements. So under the risk-based framework, we're moving into a world where we're sort of modernizing and using online instrumentation to tell us sort of instantaneously what our systems are doing. Is the treatment working? Are we being protective of public health? And providing automatic diversions if there's an issue. So this is a really great benefit for affordability and for equity and access to on-site non-potable water systems. So I'll lead with that, Taylor. Hopefully I didn't steal your thunder there, but I know you had some great examples from your program, and maybe you can speak to that.
I think it's important to think about, and equity is certainly an important topic to think about when we're talking about access to water and sanitation. And I like to draw on parallels that we've seen in like the distributed solar industry and solar PV industry, where at the advent of solar PV, more affluent communities were the ones that were typically adopting solar panels. And as incentives came online, adoption and costs came down, adoption increased. And I think, became more mainstream in terms of widespread adoption that we see today of solar PV. I think, there's a similar trajectory for decentralized on-site non-potable water systems. We do hear and we do see that today the early adopters of on-site systems are the wealthier building owners and wealthier developers and tech campuses that kind of have the capital and the capacity to invest in this type of infrastructure. But with the early adopters, there's proof of concept, there's development of local programs with SB 966, there's development of incentives like our grant program that we have in San Francisco, where we're encouraging through financial grant assistance projects to install on-site water treatment systems. I think we'll see wider adoption of these systems and benefits accruing to more diverse stakeholders. And I did want to point out a recent report that was released by the National Wildlife Federation Texas Coast program that highlighted opportunities for water reuse and affordable housing. Certainly in San Francisco, I think that's the greatest opportunity that we see to improve equity related to access to on-site reuse is in our affordable housing developments. And that report is really good. I'll link to it in the chat, but it's again talks about barriers that are specific to affordable housing, including the financial burden on the upfront capital cost and ongoing maintenance, the lack of technical knowledge and capacity to install and operate and manage these systems, and then suggest some opportunities and solutions on how we can all work together more collaboratively to improve access for affordable housing developments. And it points to some interesting and creative financing opportunities. It stresses building more collaborative partnerships with water utilities and governments and affordable housing developers, and also just generally simplifying projects or simplifying processes and permitting for affordable housing projects by making very clear what the processes are, and potentially doing things like waiving permitting fees or waiving utility connection fees to really help improve equitable access to on-site water systems that we know have a lot of benefits, like reducing water and sewer bills for the residents, potential greening of the urban environment when on-site water treatment systems incorporate things like natural wetlands, and a variety of other benefits that we're seeing with the rising cost of water, rising cost of electricity, everything, rising costs in general. So I think we wanted to just end on a hopeful note that there's hope out there really to help improve access to these systems.
Perfect. Thanks, Dennis. I think that's a wrap for us. I put one more link in the chat on the report that Taylor mentioned out of Texas. area.
Yes, I'm not sure why you weren't able to just go out to everyone. I'm going to have to check
I don't know, too much
the
multitasking.
nested Zoom kind of controls on that. Yeah, so we wanted to make just have a kind of a couple of questions. And for one thing, I don't know if you were on earlier. Ken Jenkins of Cal Water was talking about their research and their kind of development fees over with over a 50, I guess, if a development had an impact over 50 acre feet. They were assessing fees, and it seems to me that that is something that would be part of a developer would, start thinking about lowering their water use on a development. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm aware of the program Cal Water is developing, and I think we'll see more of that in the future. And as Taylor mentioned, the cost of water and sewer is not going down; it's going up. It's just a matter of at what pace. And so, start to see some more, some more costs make these systems makes more sense from a business case, because water, especially, is so undervalued in our economy. So, projects that have a bigger water impact are forcing water providers like Cal Water into making big infrastructure investments. And so how you spread that impact throughout your ratepayer base is a active topic in any utility.
There was a question about basically about, and I think you might have answered some of this in chat, but wanted to bring it out about water reuse systems. Do they always need a human operator, and will it always be so in the foreseeable future? And so there was talk, I think Mehdi and Amelia kind of talked about grade V operators.
Grade 5. Yeah.
Yeah, grade 5.
Yeah, so I think, Matt, that's a great question. I mean, I alluded to that, and I think I saw your question and wanted to indirectly respond to that by stating that a benefit of on-site water reuse, especially in the non-potable world, is that we are now shifting from the regulatory environment that's comfortable with remote monitoring and an understanding of what those critical control points are. And so the operator touch points can be a lot lower and aren't necessarily so for these smaller distributed facilities. So there will be the need for plant operators. And Taylor, we didn't have time, but you might want to speak briefly to the operator training program that you guys are excited about.
Yeah, with the National Blue Ribbon Commission, one of our current and ongoing research projects is to develop an operator certificate and training program specifically for operators of on-site non-potable water systems. So that work, I think, will be wrapped up sometime mid next year, but that's going to be a comprehensive training manual that will really cover all of the topic areas and issues that will be important for operating an on-site non-potable water system. And then we're partnering with Association of Boards of Certification to develop a certificate exam that will really test on the knowledge that you'll be learning from the training manual.
Great, and yeah, we'll get into that. I mentioned, and now this might be more of an advanced course for already experienced operators, but we get into that aqua collar job aspects and the wet talk, and perhaps actually one of our other features is a brown bag events that we have that would get into, maybe you can get into the particulars of the curricula. Anyway, great discussion, and